using precision instruments, her skilled hands execute a task few can perform. You'd think all this training would go to her head. Nah, it goes to yours. Supercuts. A supercut every time.
Hi, I'd like an oil change, and don't forget my game piece.
Some people would do anything to play Jiffy Lube's Great American Giveaway.
Parlez-vous Pennzoil?
That's because we're giving away fabulous vacations.
Holy cow.
And thousands of other terrific prizes.
You shouldn't have.
The Great American Giveaway from Pennzoil and Jiffy Lube.
Woof.
Now everyone's a winner.
Jiffy Lube, the Bay Area's favorite oil change. Call for the location nearest you.
On special nights you'll see a sight that makes a grown man cry. They're pumping sweet on tiny wheat, shellfish in the sky. Stations from on high.
Black Angus presents steak, shrimp, and Alaskan snow crab. Only $9.95. But not for long.
Back on Night Focus on KGO Radio and KGO TV, a special edition with KGO TV and KGO Radio's Greg Jarrett. And let's bring another caller into the program here. Myrtle from Emeryville. Good evening. Welcome. You're on.
Yeah, I would like to know how the soldiers felt about all of the protesting going on over here.
You know, I watched a soldier who came in with a full pack and with a flak jacket on, sat down in front of a television set, and the first thing he saw after being in the field for about 3 weeks was a protest in San Francisco. He looked stricken. His face looked like he was in total pain, and he was shaking his head. But then, after a few minutes, I went over with my microphone, and I said, how do you feel about that? I want to get the story. And he looked at me, and he said, you know, I guess that's what we're over here for, is to fight for people to be able to do that. And he accepted it, and that was it. Almost everybody had that same opinion.
Although it was a very serious thing that was going on over there, I'm sure there were some humorous moments. There were some times when there was some pretty good belly laughs.
Well, there's a piece of black humor that I'll quickly share with you where there was a tent full of sleeping soldiers, very curled up in the sleeping bag as I described before, with only their face showing. And two guys thought it would be funny, so they put on their full chemical suits with the gas masks, ran into the tent with flashlights, and started shaking these guys. And when one would wake up and start unzipping his sleeping bag, the one with the gas mask on would yell, "Okay, I found another one who's alive."
Oh, no.
And I mean, it's horrible if you can imagine that feeling. Oh. And putting on the gas mask as fast as they could. But those guys got in quite a bit of trouble, but a lot of people got a lot of laughs out of that one. I was in the tent next door.
Well, you need humor in a situation like that. I mean, you need... There are probably a lot of running gag things, too, as Richard, I think, was intimating, because the situation is so fraught with fear and rawness.
Walk around the corner and find somebody who made a hot tub out of a packing crate, some plastic, and a boat motor. I found that, too.
It was co-ed hot tub.
A very co-ed hot tub. Yeah. Some nurses were there. I didn't get in the tub. No, I didn't.
Oh, I was going to say, was that up near the front line?
That was right on the Iraqi border. The 44th Medical Brigade had some reserve units, and it was a reserve unit that took the initiative and made that hot tub.
They obviously didn't listen to Dean Adele, who said you can get herpes in a hot tub. But anyway.
I don't get any medals for that either.
No, I don't think so. We are going to be with you on Friday in our regular spot here on Night Focus. We're going to be talking, unless something breaks out very unusual between now and then, about New Jack City, the movie and the reaction to it, and movies like that. There's been, as you know, a lot of violent incidents in reaction to that movie. We're also going to continue talking to Greg Jarrett on Radio 810. Greg, all I can say is what everybody's been saying. Your work has been absolutely superlative, and you have done us all proud.
I appreciate that. And if you're hungry, I've got a MRE we can share here later, and an Iraqi headdress. So.
Have you ever had MRE stuff?
Oh, I've had that. All right. I've had too much of that stuff. Yeah, it was great having you over there. It really gave us an advantage here. Having someone on the front line, having those reports come back to us every night.
Well, I certainly appreciate the welcome back, and I know the soldiers who are coming back certainly deserve it a lot more than I do, and that support is what kept them strong.
I think in some cases...
There are alarming moves by the Iraqi military, and the United States is concerned. We also have dramatic audio of the capture of a U.S. pilot during the war. We'll talk to him tonight. Also, we'll talk with a military doctor who is helping Air Force POWs re-enter society.
This is ABC News Nightline. Reporting from Washington with the latest on the Persian Gulf, Ted Koppel.
Even as President Bush met today on the island of Martinique to discuss post-war matters with the President of France, it becomes increasingly evident that there is unfinished business in Iraq, if not in the minds of all coalition partners or on the agenda of the United Nations, then certainly in the mind of President Bush. The President has long made it clear that he is disinclined to leave Saddam Hussein in power. That presents both a political and a military problem because Saddam is using what is left of his military forces to consolidate his power in his fractured nation. Only yesterday, President Bush warned Iraq that the United States is not prepared to see the use of military helicopters to suppress the uprisings that are cropping up in cities throughout that country. Today, there is further evidence that Saddam Hussein, once again, is ignoring U.S. warnings. Joining us now is ABC's Pentagon correspondent, Bob Zelnick. Once again, aircraft involved, right, Bob?
That's correct, Ted. According to senior Pentagon officials, the U.S. now has firm proof that within the last couple of days, Iraq moved fixed-wing combat aircraft between bases inside Iraq in clear violation of the agreement reached at the end of hostilities. Now, there's no easy explanation for why they've done that, but one assumption is they might be positioning the aircraft to move against those who have been involved in the uprising against the regime.
Have we ever gotten, Bob, a detailed revelation by the U.S. government as to what was in that agreement, in the discussions between General Schwarzkopf and the Iraqi generals?
We really haven't, Ted. It's been coming out piecemeal, apart from the major provisions which were discussed at the time. For example, we learned through explanations yesterday that the Iraqis received permission from the Allies to use helicopters around the country, but only because their transportation system was damaged during the war. And the United States regarded it as a violation of that understanding when they used gunships against the dissenters.
Now, if in fact they are using fixed-wing aircraft or moving them so that they can use them against some of the people in their country, against some of these uprisings, what options would the United States have?
Well, I think the first thing the United States is about to do, if it has not done so already, is to issue a very stern warning to Iraq that they're flirting with grave danger by violating the accord. Then, of course, one of the clear options would be the use of air power against the Iraqi fixed-wing aircraft or any other targets that would seem appropriate.
In the 30 or 40 seconds that we have left, Bob, you were telling me earlier apparently General Schwarzkopf is not enamored with that idea. He wants to get everybody out as quickly as possible.
My information is that the Central Command would like the U.S. to pay less attention to internal developments inside Iraq and pay only attention to Iraq's compliance with the agreements as regards Kuwait and those matters. I think there is some division there, but the administration itself is clearly of a mind to stay around and oversee this process and hopefully see the end of Saddam Hussein's rule.
Bob Zelnick, thank you. When we come back, we'll talk with former POW Jeffrey Fox, an Air Force lieutenant colonel who was shot down over Iraq. And Colonel Fox will also hear for the first time a powerful audio tape recording of the last moments before his capture.
All-American hero and the man everyone wants to hear from. Barbara Walters gets to know General Stormin' Norman Schwarzkopf on 2020, Friday.
Joining us now from Andrews Air Force Base is Lieutenant Colonel Jeffrey Fox, who was shot down over Iraq. When, Colonel Fox?
The 19th of February, Ted.
And what was your mission at the time?
I was a forward air controller, and my mission was to go into the target area and locate tanks, artillery tubes, and trucks, and so forth.
You were shot down. Do you know how you were shot down? Were you shot down by anti-aircraft fire, by SAM?
I don't know for sure what shot me down. I suspect it was a handheld SAM, IR SAM.
And once your aircraft was hit, was the ejection automatic, or did you try to nurse your plane back home?
No, after I was hit, there was probably probably 3 to 5 minutes where I was attempting to gain control of the aircraft. It began to pitch up, and eventually, within a few short minutes, I lost control of the aircraft and was forced to eject.
And what was your altitude at the time, do you know?
I'm guessing that the altitude at ejection was about 3,500 feet.
Do you know what kind of an area you landed in? I mean, you had, in effect, been scouting that area out, so you must have been fairly familiar with it.
Well, I knew that there was certainly some infantry down there with possibly some tanks and associated artillery batteries.
Was this in Kuwait or over Iraq?
It was over Iraq.
And what happened after you hit the ground?
Well, as soon as I hit the ground, I did a real quick inventory of my personal gear. I took off my my parachute harness, and I began immediately to walk or to hobble as rapidly as I could in a southerly direction.
You say hobble. Why, you were injured on ejection?
Right. My right knee was very painful, and I must have twisted it during the ejection.
All right. What we're going to do right now, Colonel Fox, is, and you and I were just chatting before the interview. I gather you have not heard this. You were in radio contact with, what, some other OA-10 pilots?
Well, initially I just made radio transmissions in the blind, and I recall that AWACS replied initially, and that probably a minute or so later, some other A-10 aircraft replied that they had heard me and that they were en route to the area.
All right. Well, this audio tape rather was obtained by the Providence Journal Bulletin, and we're grateful to them for making it available to us. Let's give a listen to it, Colonel.
Okay.
Hey, dude, I'm on the ground. I'm ejected. Roger, copy. Your coordinates, sir? Oh, I sure don't, man. I sure don't. DM, Echo 5. Echo 5, copy. Nail 5-3, enable contact Bulldog on Cherry 3. I cannot have the frequency card, guys. Head south. And here come some guys to pick me up. God damn it. Hard left. Nail 5-3, and contact Bulldog on guard. They're coming for me, dude. I'm coming your way. I'm across the hardball from you. There's a guy coming at me with a gun. I only see one. I don't see anyone else. Hey, copy that. I'm coming your way. If you see an A-10 overhead, look for me. He's yelling, telling me to get my hands up. Okay, copy that. Dale 5-3, Winter on Counting on my crash thing? I don't see. I'm coming to you. Do you see an A-10 overhead? No, I do not. You got the black 100 yards away. I'm trying to get through the can. I don't know where you are. Crash site today. I'm not holding on any hope here. Smoke the left. Dale 5-5's got a tally on your smoke site. Safe direction from there. I'm 100 meters to the south. Copy that. I'm inbound. All right, guys. He's here.
Gets my adrenaline pumping. What does it do for yours?
Yes, sir. It gets mine going, too.
What's your first thought? I mean, I gather that's the first time you've heard it since it was recorded, since it happened.
Yes, that's correct.
What are your thoughts?
Well, he got me. Those guys could have been a little bit closer. I would have had probably an opportunity to keep going south, but as luck would have it, they just couldn't get there in time.
I mean, somehow, when I heard that guy say, "Do you know what your coordinates are?" I guess you had a couple of other things on your mind after you were hit by that sand than checking your coordinates, huh?
Yes, sir. I couldn't have told them my coordinates if my life depended on it, but I don't know that they knew that I was, in fact, on the ground. I suspect they might have thought that I was still in the air.
I don't want you to give away, I mean, if this is still something that ought to remain confidential, just, forget about it. But what's a bulldog and a cherry tree?
The cherry, he asked me to come up on a cherry 3, which is a frequency.
Ah, I thought it was cherry tree. So
no, I believe it was cherry 3, and I needed the frequency card to be able to look that frequency up, and of course, having just ejected, I didn't have that.
And when he was talking about coming across the hardball, was it hardball? Is that what he said?
Right, that's correct. There was a blacktop road that I believe was to west of my position, and he was telling me that he had crossed the hardball road and was en route to my position.
When we come back, Lieutenant Colonel Fox talks about his capture and his treatment at the hands of the Iraqis. Pilots failed to locate Lieutenant Colonel Fox. He was captured by an armed Iraqi soldier. So walk me through it a little bit, Jeff. From the moment then that he picked you up, what happened to you? Did he treat you well initially?
Yeah, initially, the first thing he wanted me to do was shut the radio off, and we did that, and then he took my sidearm, and then we began to go in an easterly direction. He was actually helping me as I was sort of hobbling with my knee, and probably within several minutes, another Iraqi soldier came up on a dirt bike, a motorcycle, and they told me to get on behind the driver. I did that, and the fellow that captured me got on behind me, and away we went.
And then what happened?
Well, they brought me to the first of many series of bunkers where the officers were. They took all my flying gear off, my G-suit and survival vest and so forth, took me inside the bunker, and began to ask me some, basic questions. And probably within the first 10 minutes, they gave me some food, some water, and some soup.
One would think, by the time this happened, U.S. planes have been bombing Iraqi positions for a long time. I must confess to you, if I were in Iraqi, I wouldn't be particularly well disposed toward an American flyer.
Well, Ted, that's exactly right. And I expected the worst, and every minute that I wasn't beaten was good.
And how long did that last?
For about 2 days, I suspect. As long as I was held by the Iraqi army, I was treated well, fairly. I was fed, and I wasn't beaten or mistreated or mishandled.
And then you were what, passed up along the lines to Baghdad?
Eventually, I went through the army channels up to, I believe I went to Basra, and then from Basra up to Baghdad.
And how long did that take?
I would say about 2 days or so.
And during all of that time, well treated, no problem?
Well treated, yes.
And once you got to Baghdad, you were what, handed over to, do you have any idea, was it military intelligence, or who would have taken over?
I don't know for sure, Ted. I know that I had a sense of passing from the regular army to another group, whether that was political or army intelligence, but it was definitely a different group.
What about the atmosphere?
These gentlemen were a little more businesslike, a little sterner, a little harsher, and a little rougher in their treatment. During one interview that I had with some of these gentlemen, I was blindfolded and I had my hands tied, and there was about 3, I suspect, just kind of circling me in a chair. And of course I was in sort of a crouched position, getting ready for the worst here, and in fact it happened. They just out of the blind hit me in the right ear, or right side of the head several times, punctured my eardrum, and then simultaneously they were hitting my right knee with what appeared to be what I thought was a solid rubber, kind of a billy club kind of thing.
That's your bad knee?
Right.
They knew you had an injured knee?
Well, I had told them that I was injured. I had an injured elbow and that I had injured my right knee. I don't know that they were picking on it because it was injured, but all the treatment in that interrogation occurred on the right side.
And what was the purpose, do you think, of the violence? To disorient you, to make you feel more alone, or was it really for the extraction of information?
I don't believe it was for the extraction of the information, because after the beating, I don't believe that I don't believe that I was interrogated again that evening. I just think that they were doing that as a matter of course.
Were you kept isolated from other Americans, or?
They attempted to keep us isolated throughout the, you know, my captivity. It was only by a matter of circumstance that I actually learned that my location in Baghdad was where all the other Americans were being kept.
What was the worst part for you? The physical deprivation, the hunger, the violence, the loneliness, the isolation?
Well, Ted, for me, the toughest part was sitting in that cell and listening to the guards go up and down the corridor and stopping. The guards would stop randomly at doors and either open them or bang them, you know, just to keep you going. And for me, the worst part was fearing that those footsteps would stop at my door. And many times they did, and sometimes they would open. And then what was bad for me was wondering whether or not they were going to yank you out for an interrogation, come in there and, you know, rough you up a little bit, or, you know, in some cases actually give you some food and water.
Did you ever believe that it could be over as quickly as it would, or did you have sort of mental images of some of those guys like Alvarez and McCain who were in there for years in Vietnam?
Ted, I never thought that that the war would go more than a month. I had flown for 30 combat sorties. I had seen many of the briefings. I had heard President Bush. I had seen the support and the direction that the war was going. And I recall President Bush saying that this was not going to be a Vietnam. And there was no doubt in my mind that this was going to be over very, very shortly. I had actually seen from the air the forces that were massing south of the border. And it never entered my mind that it would go, you know, much beyond a couple of months. And I think that's where I geared myself to that.
All right, Colonel Fox, thank you very much. Welcome home. I know you've got surgery on that knee tomorrow.
His most intense work was done at the end of this hallway, where security was at its tightest. This is the war.
And this is the war room. This is where it all happened.
This is the first time General Schwarzkopf has allowed a camera crew to tour his war room.
I would sit in that chair right there. Bob Johnson's the chief of staff. Byrd is the director of operations. And then what you have is back all around the back wall over there, all the various staff directorates who would be here, and there would be a representative from all of them here at any given time. What you have up here is we would generally have 3 or 4 different maps. So one map is the ground operations.
What's this?
This is the location of all the friendly forces. So we'd have the location of all the friendly troops, where they were located. Over here would generally be the intelligence map, where we'd have the location of all the enemy forces. And this constantly changes. You sit here in front of you, and as the situation changes, it's posted.
Red phone for the president?
Red phone, well, the red phone, normally for Colin Powell, but I can talk hotline to Colin Powell, hotline to Secretary of Defense, or for that matter, hotline to the White House if I need to.
Did you talk to the president often?
No, not often. He called me. I've talked to him, I guess, 3 times since I've been over here.
How often did you talk to Colin Powell?
Every single day. At least, I would say at least once a day, but sometimes it was 3 and 4 and 5 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is the tactical radio system, and on this radio system, I could talk right down to the tactical commanders in the field if need be.
Who is this little fellow?
That's a bear. That's a baby grizzly bear. That's a baby grizzly bear.
He lives here?
He lives here. This has been his spot since he took up that position on the day that we started the strategic bombing campaign, and has never left that spot since. This was a gift to me from my sister for Christmas. Would you like to see him work?
Yes, sir. Is that the way you sound, General, when you're really giving orders?
Any resemblance is purely coincidental. I want you to know that.
I should ask you, is that the way you sound?
Be careful how you answer that, Bert. Remember, you could be over here a long time, Bert, right?
Norman Schwarzkopf not only talks tough, he is. Tough as nails, say those who work with him. But I discovered a vulnerable side, too, to this veteran soldier. When we sat down to talk, my very first question evoked an emotional response. General, you have 2 daughters and a young son. What did you say to your 13-year-old son when you left to come here and begin a war?
I got the family together. They didn't have any idea I'd be leaving as soon as I would. As a matter of fact, I think they really thought, because Central Command has been run from Tampa, Florida, I think that in their minds They thought that I was going to be running this whole thing from Florida. So they didn't really know when I was going to be leaving. But a couple of days before it was time to leave, I got the whole family together, and I just told them that what was going to happen. I told them it was my job, that I was proud to be doing it. I wanted them to understand why, and I wanted them to be proud of me for doing it. And that was it.
You miss them a lot, I can tell.
Yeah, I do.
Take me back the first night that our bombs were sent to Baghdad. Where were you? What were you doing? What were you feeling?
We, of course, knew what time the first shots would be fired, 20 minutes to 3 in the morning. Knew exactly who was going to fire them. And so I assembled the staff downstairs at 2:30 in the morning in the war room. Chaplain was there. Had the chaplain say a little prayer for the protection of our servicemen and women. And then we played Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA. And we did. Anybody who knows me knows that I love that song. But that was sort of what it was all about. And then we just said, okay, now let's go to work. And at 20 minutes to 3, we got the reports that the first shots had been fired, and that started it.
I know this is a strange question to ask a general, but were you ever scared?
Sure.
When most?
I've been scared in every war I've ever been in.
What was Saddam Hussein's biggest mistake?
His predictability.
His predictability? I always thought he was so unpredictable. Everybody says we don't know him, we don't know what makes him do things.
We studied the Iran-Iraq campaigns very, very carefully, and based upon the Iran-Iraq campaigns, we came up with a lot of assumptions of what they would do, and we weren't wrong a single time.
By the way, General, what do you think is going to happen to those Iraqi planes in Iran?
I think they're going to stay there.
So if Saddam Hussein is as predictable as you said, why did Saddam Hussein send those planes to Iran?
Well, I don't think he did. My feeling is that they went to Iran and got a gentleman's agreement, for what that's worth, to send their commercial airplanes over there. So their commercial airplanes all flew over to Iran and were safe. I think the first group of pilots that went over there with their military aircraft recognized very quickly that they were take off and die if they fought us, and therefore they said, well, gee, if these other airplanes are going over there, we can scoot on over there also. I think that's probably what started the floodgates open.
And they're going to stay there.
I don't think there's any question about that.
General, how do you feel about the American armchair television analysts who fought the war for us every day with maps? Truth.
Most of them were a joke. Most of them, and a lot of them are my friends, so I don't want to give the wrong impression, but you know, some of the analysis that you heard was ludicrous. They didn't know what was going on. They didn't have the facts at hand, and they were talking about stuff that it didn't make any sense. Some of them I resented. I resented the fact that they had served in our military and received military training for a great number of years, and then they were using that military training to guess openly on television what I was going to do, what we were going to do over here, on a program that they knew very well was being monitored by the enemy. I find that's difficult for me to reconcile in my sense of values, why anyone would do that. There were some that were very good, and I don't want to get into names, okay, but there were some that I thought were very helpful in their analysis. They were careful to, I think, explain to the American public what was going on, but they were not going beyond that point to predict what was going to happen or to predict the reasons why, so on and so forth.
When in the middle of the war, you looked up on your television screen and you saw Peter Arnett at CNN and other reporters in Baghdad, tell me how you felt. Was that helpful? Was that harmful? Did it bother you? It's something that's still a matter of controversy in our country.
When Peter Arnett first started making his broadcast from Baghdad, it didn't bother me a bit. Subsequently, there was a lot of resentment on my part and on the part of my entire staff, and that's when the broadcast turned to the Iraqis running the team out, showing them a civilian target that had been heavily bombed, and said, "You see there." The implication was almost as if we were lying to the American people when we were saying that we were deliberately trying not to target civilian targets, and that resulted in a great deal of resentment on the part of myself and my staff, because, of course, they didn't run out and say, "Here's military targets that have been totally destroyed," or "Here's a military." It was all the implication that was there that we were deliberately doing that kind of thing, and that was resented by every member of my headquarters because it simply was not a true picture of what was going on. And please don't misunderstand. I have great respect for Peter Arnett, and I have great respect for the press and the American people's right to know. But there was something about that that still bothers me a great deal.
General, take us to that meeting with the Iraqi generals. We all saw the pictures. We haven't heard that much about it. I want to know how you felt when you saw these generals. What did you say to them? Were there any surprises? Take us to that tent.
Let me tell you what happened before that, because it had a bearing. We flew into Kuwait to land, and because you fly obviously into the wind, all the black smoke was blowing directly at the airplane, and we descended into this black smoke where you couldn't see anything. And then suddenly I was looking out the window, and you could just make the ground out, and there were these huge balls of fire. And I was totally unprepared for the scene. And the first thing that flashed through my mind is if I ever visualized what hell would look like, this is it.
These are the oil fields burning?
Yeah, this is the oil fields that were burning. This is south of Kuwait City now. And it was so senseless. I mean, it absolutely was senseless destruction. By every definition, I mean, it would accomplish nothing. And so by the time I landed at Safwan, now I was angry. I mean, I thought, why would anybody do something like this? You know, it really was a sense of anger at this senseless destruction. And but it was very important, I felt, that whatever we did, this discussion should not be one of humiliation. I'm not too sure what they expected, because when they arrived, they were, of course, in their not their full dress uniforms, but they were in dress uniforms with shoulder, boards on and their ribbons and all this sort of business, and they got out, and I was standing there like this, and
your Sunday best.
Yeah, my Sunday best. I mean,
you were clean. I mean,
clean. Yeah, I'd showered the night before,
right.
See, but I had a young American interpreter who went to the general, and we'd already decided that everyone who went in that tent would be searched electronically, and the general didn't think too much of that idea, and then I told the Air Force major to tell him, well, that's all right, but that's what was going to happen anyhow, and that I would be the first one to be searched. And he immediately looked at me and said, well, the only person that's going to search me is my counterpart. We said, what do you mean by your counterpart? And he said, the person that's going to negotiate. And I said, I'm the person that's going to negotiate. And the guy, he kind of looked down at my boots, and then he looked up at me again, and he looked down, and he said, well, who are you? And I said, I'm General Schwarzkopf. And this transpired, and he said, oh, all right.
You hadn't even seen your picture?
I don't know whether he'd seen my picture
or not. You're not famous in Baghdad?
I apparently am not famous in Baghdad. But that I mean, it was just sort of funny that I think that he didn't expect the guy to be out there in the same uniform that all the rest of the troops were in, to be the person that was going to be negotiating, or not negotiating, but discussing with him.
I understand that the one place that they were surprised was when you gave them the number of the Iraqi POWs.
They had said, we are now ready to give you the numbers, and we said, fine, and he said, we have 41 POWs, and he gave us a breakdown by country, and he interrupted me. He said, would you mind telling us how many prisoners you have? And I said, well, as of last night, we had 60,000, but we're still counting. And the entire delegation, you could just see there was a sense of they all kept a poker face, but you could tell that every one of them just immediately tensed.
Do you think that they knew then that they really were defeated when Saddam Hussein was still saying this is a glorious war, we have fought valiantly, we have won? I mean, did it sink in?
Very early on, they tried to say that they were withdrawing. that they had voluntarily withdrawn, but I wasn't about to accept that at that point. I just said, we could probably argue from now until sunset as whether or not what you were doing was withdrawing, and then therefore we're not here to discuss that. We're here to discuss the arrangements that will make sure that we continue to cease the offensive. So let's get on with that, and I don't want to discuss that.
If you could meet Saddam Hussein, what would you ask him or say to him?
Get out of town.
More of General Schwarzkopf when we return, his anguish over Vietnam, why he hates being called Stormin' Norman, and his plans. Storm are beginning to come home. When will General Schwarzkopf be returning? Well, not for at least another month, he told us. He said he still has troops in the field. The general who served 2 tours in Vietnam is a 4-star general. In American history, only 5 men have become 5-star generals. Home for the general these days is a small, cramped room that contains a bed and a desk separated by a screen, and that's about it. It didn't take us very long for this private tour. So here is part 2 of our interview with the general.
This is home sweet home for the last 2 months.
This palatial, teeny-weeny room?
This is it. This room was bare when we started, except for the maps and the desk and the furniture, of course, and everything in here, you see, has been something that someone has sent me.
Why a camouflage cover on the bed?
My entire first tour in Vietnam, I spent wrapped up in one of these. That's called a poncho liner. I don't like to sleep with a heavy quilt, and so I had the poncho liner, and we threw it on, and it's just sort of been there ever since.
How much sleep did you get on an average in this bed?
Some nights 4 hours a night downtime, and some nights, you might be lucky and get 5 or 6, but most of the time it was about 4 hours, really. This is a piece of Iraq.
Iraq itself?
Iraq itself.
Someone sent it to you?
Yeah, this unit, I visited this unit the other day, and they brought this out with them on the 4th of March when they came out, and they wanted me to have a piece of Iraq, so that's...
So now you do.
So now I have a piece of Iraq. That entire box of tapes was sent by someone who found I like classical music, and they recorded all their favorite tapes and sent them to me. It really has been wonderful. I get about 150 letters a day.
Do you answer them?
Oh, everyone.
Now you're going to get more. Is it true that you're getting romantic proposals?
I've had a few.
Ah, I see. You don't want to discuss them? You want Brenda maybe watching?
No, I don't think Brenda has anything to worry about. I don't think Brenda has anything to worry about.
And these 2 beauties are your daughters?
This is Cindy and Jessica.
They are really beautiful girls, aren't they?
Well, thank you. Thank you. And that's Christian.
Christian. Your dad?
He passed away in 1958.
Your father was a major general. Do you think about him at all now?
Yeah, I probably thought about him more since I've been over here than I have in many, many years. I mean, many times I've just thought that, if he was looking at me now, I knew he'd be proud.
There are certain questions I ask you, like about your father, and the tears come to your eyes.
I didn't know it showed.
The old picture of generals. Generals don't cry. Generals don't get tears in their eyes.
Sure they do.
They just didn't admit it?
Oh, I think they admitted it. Grant, after Shiloh, went back and cried. Sherman went back and cried. I mean, these are the tough old guys. Lee cried at the loss of human life, at the pressures that were brought to bear. Lincoln cried. I don't think, and frankly, any man that doesn't cry scares me a little bit. I don't think I would like a man who was incapable of enough emotion to get tears in his eyes every now and then. That type of person scares me. That's not a human being.
Why do you dislike being called Stormin' Norman?
Stormin' Norman tends to portray someone who just goes around and raises hell all the time and just kicks everybody around and has no sensitivity at all. And I think that's why I don't like it. I know that's why I don't like it. I have a temper. I will freely admit to that. I'm not proud of it. I don't like myself when I lose my temper. But I wear my heart squarely on my sleeve. I believe I owe it to everyone to let them know when I don't like something. But I don't carry a grudge. I do not browbeat my staff. I do not drive people into the ground. I'm not a total martinet. I'm a human being, and Storm and Norman portrays something that's you know, somebody that's mad all the time and raising hell all the time, and that's not me.
Do you think we should have compulsory military service?
I think we should have compulsory national service. I think that it's a wonderful thing to be an American. We should all want to do something for the privilege of being able to call ourselves American. And I'm not saying it has to be in the military. There's the environment, there's the national parks, there's the hospitals, there's 1,000 different ways. All of us can do something.
General, there's probably not one soldier who came back from Vietnam the same as he went. And you have talked in the past about Vietnam. How did Vietnam change you?
I was probably a lot more happy-go-lucky before Vietnam and after. And that's because I came to understand that carelessness and negligence and lousy leadership and self-serving officers and generals cost human lives. And you just can't forgive that. You cannot forgive that sort of crassness. People who are more concerned with their ambition than they are with their troops is unforgivable to me. And again, you're supposed to be able to forgive everything. I can't forgive that. I cannot forgive that.
You said recently in an interview that you were forced to lie about the number of casualties in Vietnam.
Sure.
Is this why you have been careful or been unable to give the number of casualties in this war because you don't want to, I don't know what, make that kind of mistake or give that kind of misinformation?
Yeah. Barbara, there was a terrible erosion in integrity in the armed forces during Vietnam. I don't think that many of us came out of Vietnam and could hold our heads up and say, my sense of integrity is still lily white and pure, because we all know that we had lied about body count. We all knew that there had been a lot of other lies. And it did bad things to the officer corps. But it's a different officer corps today. It's an officer corps that has learned from that experience. But when we went into this thing, I was bound and determined that we were going to tell it like it was. Absolutely tell it like it was.
General, you came home from Vietnam after the second tour, and you said people spit at you.
Oh, no. Nobody ever spit at me.
Ah.
And I can assure you, had they, there would have been an immediate reckoning. But they did spit at a lot of people in military uniform.
Okay.
Excuse me, but I just...
No, I'm glad you cleared it up.
Nobody was going to spit at me.
No.
Nobody.
Now I'm seeing the temper.
No,
You know what I'm getting at.
Sure.
After Vietnam, did you ever think of resigning from the Army?
Oh, yeah. Sure. I thought about resigning from the Army before Vietnam a lot of times, too.
Why didn't you quit after Vietnam?
There were a lot of things that needed to be fixed. And if you quit and ran away from it, then you know, that's not the time to quit, not when everything's broken. The time to quit is when everything's fixed.
Oh, boy, what an opening. When you go home, first of all, do you have any idea what people think of you at home? You're going to come home such a hero.
But I'm not a hero. And that's important. It's important to me. The people... I've said this before, and I don't want to keep repeating myself. It doesn't take a hero to order men into battle. It takes a hero to be one of those men that goes into battle, and those are the people that are heroes. Those are the people that should receive the adulation.
Well, let's hope they do as well. You're going to have a lot of choices. Now, if you had your druthers, would you really like to retire? Because this summer, supposedly, your 35 years are up and you could retire.
I'd planned for a long time to retire this summer. I've been at this business for 39 years. You know what I really want to do?
Yeah.
There's bound to be a great cause out there that can use a tired old retread general to serve it. To serve, there's bound to be a cause. Whether it's the conservation, the environment, the wildlife. I'm a great believer in educational exchange. Young people
So
from
you'd like
one
to be
country.
the head of a big organization, non-profit organization.
It doesn't have to be big.
Little non-profit organization. You're not going to make a lot of money doing that.
Well, I would. Yeah, I've got 3 kids to put through college. I wouldn't mind making a little money too. Believe me, you don't get rich in the Army. I can assure you that.
Would it mean a great deal to be a 5-star general, should that happen?
I can't even begin to visualize myself as a 5-star general. When I think of the people who are 5-star generals, I can't even see myself standing in their shadow. And I mean that very seriously. It would be a magnificent honor. I mean, it would be an honor that surpasses anyone's dreams. But I don't see it. I really don't.
Are you a Republican or a Democrat, sir?
I'm an independent. I've always been.
Either side can draft you?
No, that may be neither side can draft me. Maybe that's
Florida has been talking, or people in Florida have been talking about the possibility of your running for the Senate. You could serve that way. That would be a way of continuing service to the country. I'm serious now. Would you think of that?
I'm not too sure I'm cut out to be a politician. And I'd rather not get into all but I can't say never, okay? I mean, if there were some, again, if there was a calling, but I certainly, right now, I don't know where to go from here except to say that right now I have absolutely no political ambition at all.
General, you've talked to your troops here. Would you like to say something to the families at home about these men and women?
Well, let me say something about the families. The military family is just as much of a hero as the troops are. And people don't realize it, but if you love a soldier, if you love a sailor, if you love a Marine, if you love an airman, you're going to sacrifice a lot. People don't realize how much they sacrifice. So all I want to say to the families is thanks for loving us.
And thank you, General. And thank all of your men and women for serving us.
4,000 of Iraq's Republican Guard have surrendered to them. And with power crumbling all around him, Saddam will give a televised speech tomorrow. Iraqi radio claims it will be an important, historic address. It would be Saddam's first appearance since he announced the troop pullout from Kuwait 2.5 weeks ago.
And although the United States has agreed not to interfere in Iraq's internal affairs, the pressure is becoming obvious. And now U.S. forces have been redeployed in Iraq, sent back to the positions they held when the war ended. Central Command says it's because a formal ceasefire has yet to be signed. All of this is keeping the leash so short that Saddam has nowhere to go.
There'll be movement of forces as we undertake the overall redeployment, but we will maintain sufficient forces in the area to guarantee that we can control that 15% of Iraq that we now occupy.
President Bush has warned the Iraqis against using helicopter gunships in battles with the rebels, and now a movement of fixed-wing aircraft has been detected. U.S. Central Command denies this redeployment is showing support for the anti-Saddam forces.
Secretary of State James Baker reiterated the not-so-veiled threat as he concluded meetings with Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev today. Even Gorbachev signaled Saddam that he would get no support from Moscow as he tries to put down internal rebellions. Baker and the Soviets have had to overcome differences of opinion in the closing days of the war in an effort to move forward with arms treaties of their own. The Secretary moves on to meeting with leaders of the Baltic states tomorrow.
General Colin Powell, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, took on the National Newspaper Association today. Powell gave the media generally good marks for its coverage of the war, but criticized reports that jeopardized security, and he defended the Pentagon's censorship rules.
In this war, forget about Vietnam, in this war, we were as truthful as possible within the necessary and reasonable constraints of security.
ABC's military analyst Tony Quartersman reports tonight from Saudi Arabia that the U.S. Central Command is systematically setting about the unambiguous and public humiliation of Saddam Hussein. Senior U.S. intelligence officers in Saudi Arabia have told Quartersman that the movement of U.S. ground forces in southern Iraq is designed to demonstrate the total inability of the Iraqi military to respond in any way. Saddam is to be left absolutely no wiggle room. He will be required to publicly renounce any claims to Kuwait, to publicly accept the principle of reparations to all nations that he has injured, and he will be forced to accept U.S. demands that no Iraqi aircraft, fixed-wing or helicopters, be used against insurgents in Iraq. The Iraqi officer corps is so demoralized, reports Quartersman, that the eventual collapse of Saddam is now presumed to be an all but foregone conclusion. As ABC's John Lawrence reports, the evidence of chaos in southern Iraq is everywhere.
After a 2-week rest and refit in the relative calm of Kuwait, the U.S. 1st Infantry Division moved north this week across the border and into Iraq. The division was led, as it was during the war, by 1st Battalion, 34th Armor.
This is Demon X-ray. Grid is 628368, over.
Charlie Company took up positions a few miles inside Iraq on the road leading north to Basra, the scene of heavy fighting between the Iraqi army and anti-government forces.
As soon as their vehicle's clear, move them south. Yes, sir.
The commanding officer of 1st Battalion is Lieutenant Colonel Pat Ritter.
We're in a ceasefire. What that means, we hope, is that we're not going to be shooting each other. Last night, we took some AK-47 fire directly to our front. 2 of my companies reported seeing heavy machine gun fire to their front. Whether that was just Iraqi soldiers letting off steam or trying to impress us or trying to probe us, make us fire, we don't know. We all hope the war's over. Right now, we're in a ceasefire. We have rules of engagement that we're not going to fire unless we're fired upon. The level of stress, it's gotten a little higher in the last 48 hours or so.
Charlie Company's mission here is to screen the traffic in both directions, searching for weapons among the Iraqis who come upon the checkpoint.
Is there a fair amount of weaponry around?
It's everywhere. It's all over this place. Yesterday we took several AK-47s from civilian vehicles. We captured nearly 500 pounds of high explosive plastic with detonators. In the case of the small arms, the rifles, the machine guns, the small arms ammunition, that sort of stuff, the knives, the bayonets, we take those, collect those up during the day, and then we put thermite grenade on them. And it melts them down.
Groups of Iraqi soldiers in military uniforms and civilian dress tried repeatedly today to cross the American checkpoint and go south, away from Basra. Some are trying to get away from the fighting. Some are lost, trying to find their units.
Why are they coming this way?
They're surrounded, they're stable from there.
The U.S. troops have orders to send the Iraqi soldiers north, back again toward Basra. This Iraqi told the troops he had no weapons, but a few moments later, he was seen to have a knife hidden under his shirt. The GIs moved quickly.
Hold it! Hold it! Sit down.
The Iraqi said he had traveled from the far north of Iraq, where he saw Kurdish rebels defeating government troops, driving them south. After being interrogated, he was released. Other Iraqis coming south from Basra told of heavy fighting in the city.
Have there been many casualties?
في وايد ناس ماتوا.
ما لها عدد.
Uncannibal. People stacked on top of each other.
Civilians or soldiers?
مدنيين والعسكريين.
مدنيين.
Civilians.
من اكو جهه من العسكريين قله ولكن كثر مدني واكثر شيء الاعدامات.
There are some military personnel killed, but mostly civilian, and most of them by execution.
These Iraqi soldiers were caught in Kuwait City when the war ended and are now trying to go north. One of them told of being arrested by Kuwaiti police and badly beaten.
How many days did this go on?
كم يوم استمرت هذه الحالة؟ 6 days.
When were you released?
Almost 6 o'clock? Today.
In the nearby town of Safwan, just behind the American lines, the GIs have found new friends. But there is danger here. Iraqi children throw stones at the American bomb units that fail to explode during the war. Sometimes they strike them. A teenage boy is hit by shrapnel.
I think it's an inescapable feeling that when you see an obvious civilian who's caught in a war, you feel compassion for that individual. There's very little compassion for enemy soldiers. Our mission's real easy. If he's an enemy soldier, we turn him around and head him back north.
Colonel Ritter says he and his troops are looking forward to going home, but he says the last thing we want is to leave too soon. John Lawrence for Nightline near Safwan, Iraq.
When we come back, we'll talk with one of the leaders, Jabbar, an Iraqi opposition leader just back from the three-day meeting in Beirut of Iraqi opposition groups. From Pascagoula, Mississippi, Senator Trent Lott, a member of the Armed Services Committee who discussed the Iraqi situation today with the Secretary of Defense. And from New York, Gary Sick, a member of the National Security Council under President Jimmy Carter, who now teaches at Columbia University. Mr. Jabbar, from a purely military point of view, can the opposition overthrow Saddam Hussein by itself without any help from the outside?
Not unless the army, some of the army units join the Iraqi uprising, like what happened in Romania last year.
And what is
unless
happening?
Unless that happens.
Do you see evidence of that happening?
Some. It happened in Kurdistan, where the Kurdish units that were under the army, working with the Iraqi army, turned sides and joined the rebellion.
How important,
also,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, how important do you think it is that American forces, and I gather there are about 100,000 of them in southern Iraq right now, that they remain there?
There's no question that this man, Saddam Hussein, has still large powers and large number of military as well as security police, and very large for the Iraqi rebellion. And as you remember, he fought Iran 8 years and he fought 28 countries, and he's still there. Now, the Iraqi people have very few weapons, and they have no food and medicine right now, unless they really get some substantial help in that line. They cannot last longer, like I said, unless some of the army units join them.
Senator Lott, is the kind of
Su-22 warplane that was flying in violation of the ceasefire. A second plane left the area. The United States warned Iraq not to use its warplanes against any uprisings in the north or the south. White House spokesman Marlin Fitzwater said the incident does not mean there will be a resumption of hostilities. Meanwhile, in Kuwait, the government has stepped down after a widespread anger over its failure to restore basic service after the war. Kuwait's emir arrived about a week after the ceasefire.
From rubble, mud, broken dreams, and upset lives will come the new vision of downtown Santa Cruz. The popular beach community that was racked by the big quake of '89 is looking at its future tonight. Channel 7's Lon McCarran shows us the plans for rebuilding and the reaction tonight.
A standing room on the news. What went wrong at Edwards Air Force Base today? It was the first test firing of an experimental booster rocket motor for the Titan IV rocket, but instead there was a massive explosion and a fire which burned for over an hour. The 110-foot rocket motor was destroyed. There were no injuries, although a group of scientists was trapped in a nearby underground bunker until the flames diminished. The test had been aimed at improving reliability and performance of the motor so the huge Air Force Titan system can lift even bigger payloads into orbit. The cloud of chemical smoke did not represent a threat to any nearby communities, and no homes were evacuated.
And doesn't retain the heat. You may be better off to get out and dig yourself a proper snow shelter.
We reported Friday on how Ken Jordan, survival expert with the State Office of Emergency Services, dug a snug two-person snow cave, laid out a trash bag, invited us in, and was set for the night.
You can lay down up in here,
and let the storm blow out outside and be relatively comfortable.
They tell me the heat from a candle can raise the temperature in such a nest by 20 degrees. There's another way to get out of the killing winds, using skis or branches laid over a trench to support a space blanket or other material. Once it's built...
This is kind of the universal survival item. Carry a trash bag.
The bags keep you dry and retain body heat. Just cut a ventilation hole.
I spent a night in the Tuolumne River Canyon sleeping in trash bags, and it wasn't probably the most comfortable night that I had, but I also was alive and well the next morning when they came in and picked me up.
And also they tell you, contrary to the old myth about the St. Bernard with a brandy cask under its chin, don't drink alcoholic beverages in circumstances like this. Won't keep you warm. What it does is exacerbate hypothermia.
Mark, who dies?
Those that are ill-equipped and ill-prepared to be out here, both mentally and with their equipment.
What's the mental part? What do you mean by that?
They're not physically equipped with the knowledge on how to cope with their surroundings. They find out that they're over their head, and basically they give up.
Mark carries heavy wool or waterproof pants, a wool blanket, meals ready to eat, road flares, dry-packed matches, and trash bags in his car. He takes a water bottle everywhere. Common sense stuff to save your life when it's cold. In El Dorado County, Steve Davis, Channel 7 News Tonight.
Responding to tough times in the credit industry, the nation...
My feet. These rocks are so hot.
Sister, I could carry you.
Oh, thank you anyway, Father, but it's not very far, is it?
No, it's not much further. Let's move on. There's the river. Watch your step. Watch. These rocks are slippery. Easy does it. Whoop. Hang on. I mean, sister. Give me your hand, sister. These rocks are slippery. Whoops. I have you. Well, last but not least.
Oh! This is like something I once saw in a Tarzan movie.
Well, let's just hope he's not here.
Gee, I don't know about this silent plumbing, but the bathtub's just great.
Well, we're okay for now, girls. If you want to sort of wash up and cool off, go ahead. I'll keep an eye on the trail.
Okay, girls, cool it.
Hallelujah. My feet are killing me.
I wonder if I could confess a little something.
Well, you could start with the Colonel.
What? Oh, cut it out. I was only kidding.
Hey, Josie, take it easy. We may have to leave here in a hurry.
Ooh, it's so gorgeous. Oh, ooh, wow.
All that lush and beauty. But I have to be Father Osgood, the kindly country priest. Maxine. A lot of laughs. And the twins. Marguerite, the strong, silent type. Her sister Jane. Oh, what a double header. Oh, there's Josie. Oh, boy. There's her Gloria, too. Yeah. Well, they're all good. Well, I'll just have to kind of break it to them gently. Hey, that should be a lot of fun.
Josie! Josie!
Oh, phooey. I don't see what's so terrible about the human body. Besides, I like to swim in my birthday suit.
Something's wrong.
Hurry! Hi! There's a Jap soldier coming. Hurry! Hurry! The Japs are coming. Pick up all your things. We've got to hide. Fast! Move it!
Oh!
Where's Josie?
She's in the water.
What? Josie! Josie! Josie, for crying out loud, come out!
I don't have any clothes on.
I don't give a what you don't have on. Come out.
Well, all right, but turn around.
Are you crazy? Get out. Josie! Josie! Get back! Get back! Oh, brother, what a mess. All of you, get down. Get down.